Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and today we are going to be talking about overall health. We're going to address it from a couple of different angles and aspects, but overall, the message I usually put forward on my show is that we're currently living in a society that is very pill for the ill, as Rob Renee described it. And I really like that. It's easy to memorize, and the thing is, we do a lot of symptom management, at least here in America. I can't speak for other countries, but here in America, a lot of symptom management rather than dealing with the root causes of issues. And there's a lot of political drive in medicine, there's a lot of economic drive in medicine. But there are people taking a step back and working with everything and doing something that I believe is really important. Something I have complained the military is very behind on, which is individualized, personalized care. Having that doctor-patient relationship where you're actually talking to the patient and getting to know their needs and cares. Because when you try to do this broad, throw a blanket over everyone, you end up having a lot of issues because not everyone's physique is the same, not everyone's reaction to medicine is the same, not everyone has the same causes for the same symptoms, and so, or vice versa. And so I think it's really important that we look at the whole body and everything in life. So here to discuss all of that with us, Dr. Mark Sherwood, so great to have you here. And could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be with you today. I stand alone today. Usually my wife, Dr. Michelle, is with me. A little bit about us. I am a traditional naturopathic doctor. My wife, Michelle, is an osteopathic doctor. But together, we work at the Functional Medical Institute in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where we, as you stated in your intro, we personalize all healthcare decisions. So we look at a variety of angles. We look at nutrition, sleep, stress management, movement, um, activity, right? We look at DNA, we look at hormones, peptides, and supplementation, and we wrap it all around, the individual person from an emotional standpoint, spiritual standpoint, and you have to put all that together. There's no question about it. So we've been doing this a long, long time. Between us both, probably 40 years, together 15 years. And little interesting side note, before this, I was a police officer where I served my community for 24 years, and 10 years of that were on the SWAT team. And before that, I was with the world famous power team for a lot of times. I've been around the world breaking bricks and running through big piles of ice and things like that for kind of an evangelistic message. So I had a lot of experience. And between the two of us, we've written several books, I think six or seven, and then we've made, I think, eight full-length movies now. So it's been a busy life, but our passion is seeing people get well and stay well. And therefore, that leads into our mission statement, which is to lead people down the pathway of true healing.
For sure. And there's a lot to unpack there, but I want to start with a very basic question, but I think it's so important to everything that we're going to be talking about. Functional medicine. For those who have never heard of that or have heard of that but couldn't define it, what is that? What is that keyword functional medicine? What differentiates it from everything else?
Well, I think the first way to describe that is to describe what it's not. It's not symptom-based medicine. So, as you mentioned, this current healthcare system we have in this country is a disaster, and we're in the worst health we've ever been in the history of mankind's existence right now. Those are facts, not according to Mark, not according to Michelle, but according to the CDC, or the Centers of Disease Control, which I like to fondly refer to as the Centers of Disease Out of Control. Now, with that said, symptom-based medicine is, let's say, here comes Mr. Whiskey in to see Dr. Mark. Well, you complain of XYZ symptoms, and I run it through an algorithm, and I decide which medication I'm going to get you to relieve the symptoms. I get you the medication, you go out the door, and you're gone. The symptoms get better. That's a win. It never did address the root causes. If you come back 2 weeks later with different symptoms, I'm going to get you a different medication. And that's really all it is. Is it sometimes necessary? I suppose. But if that's all there is, that's not completely reaching the potential of looking at the whole person. So in comes functional medicine, which looks at different systems biology. In other words, the systems of the body. It realizes that all symptoms are interconnected. They're not separate. For example, current systems are, we have a stomach ache, the PCP refers you to the GI doc. If you have a brain issue, they refer you to the neurologist. If they have a foot issue, they refer you to the podiatrist. But they don't talk to each other. Whereas systems-based biology looks at the systems and how they interact and interdependent upon each other. And so that's where functional medicine comes in. We look at the systems. So same situation here, because Mr. Whiskey in with a few symptoms. We ask the questions. We might be thinking about medicines that might be applicable in this case, depending on the severity of those symptoms. But we're more doing a search, diving deep to determine what caused the symptoms that you have and trying to remediate or fix those things in the upstream approach so that the function of the system returns to normal, thereby the symptoms go away, and therefore takes us out of the realm of prescribing medication.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that it's almost backwards, whereas people start with isolated organs or symptoms first and then slowly brought out to the whole system instead of doing the funnel method, so to speak, where you look at the whole system and
Yep.
then if you can isolate, isolate down, isolate down, isolate down. And it just doesn't,
Correct.
I don't know, for me, someone who likes to think very logically, you know, if you have this complicated system of organs with, thousands of different cellular functions going on and all these different complicated things, why would you look at just one thing instead of first saying, all right, big picture, is everything doing its job? Okay, it is. Now let's zoom in on what's not doing its job. So it
Yeah.
definitely is. And I think part of this goes to even mental health side. The amount
Yep.
of veterans and law, especially you haven't been in law enforcement, first responders and military members who are being treated for PTSD via numbing. Just here, take weed
Yeah.
all day, sit on your front porch
Yeah.
and just numb the symptoms instead of like, hey, what can we do to try and address the root cause? And sometimes you can't, right? There's certain types of PTSD that is just deeply rooted, right? But just numbing, a lot of band-aid fixes. Whereas, hey, again, same with I feel like with so many things of depression, it's like, all right, we're just gonna numb you, and now you can't feel anything. Instead of like, okay, what is causing the depression? Is it anchored to a trauma? Is it anchored to
Mhm.
chemistry? There's a lot of different things to look at, but instead it's just like, okay, you're on the antidepressants now, and maybe you're happy, or maybe you're just not feeling as sad, and then people call it a day, and it's truly sad.
Very much so. I've dealt with a lot of trauma in my day, and I do understand the concept of PTSD. I've been, had the experience of dealing with law enforcement, and even a lot of military people as well. It kind of overlaps in the things you see, the things you go through, and the things you experience. And people that have never done that have no idea. So, people Monday morning quarterbacks, I just tell them don't miss a good opportunity to shut up, because you don't know. But having said that, you're right. The trauma issues can be anchored to something you've seen, something you experienced, and it can be anchored further back, additionally, to something you experienced as a childhood with the father and mother situation. And it goes on and on and on. And then the coping mechanism is never dealt with in that. Instead, we just numb the symptoms out with medication. Whereas we look at it from the standpoint of no one is born with a medication deficiency. In other words, I want to know that it's okay for them to have certain feelings or emotions. That's very normal. And if you didn't, I would be concerned. And so, what are we going to do? We're going to go back and ensure that they're producing a good amount of dopamine and serotonin properly. We're going to make sure that they have proper coping mechanisms. We're going to establish coping mechanisms. And we're going to do the level of things we need to do. Sometimes when people have trauma like that, they need a few hormones because the brain chemistry gets off. I mean, I could go on and on with examples, but it can be corrected most of the time if we just have an open mind and a heart. And if, most importantly, correction is what we want. But if we stop at the diagnosis, people settle in that all the time and they begin to own it. I have, or I am. And that becomes the problem.
For sure. And, I've had some guests on the show describing that they actually store their trauma as a physical pain and
Yeah.
tension. So, a guy comes in and says, hey, doc, my throat is really tense and in pain all the time. And if they just like, all right, well, here's this stuff to soothe it, they would have never found out. Luckily, his doctor and therapist worked together to find out that it was actually just from trauma and PTSD. And he was
Yeah.
storing it, clenching his throat muscles all the time. Some people, it's their shoulder, lower back. I've talked to plenty of veterans on the show who had And one guy had a huge muscle knot in his back
Mm,
from submarine life, and not from the
wow.
physicality of submarine life, but from the stress and the burnout. And that's how he stored it. And he described the day he got this like full length deep massage, and she was able to get rid of that knot, and it brought him to
Mm.
tears. He just started crying because of the release of it. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff we can get into. And I want to start with, you talked about law enforcement and then martial arts, and then the kind of how did this all lead into, functional medicine? And was it you and your wife and then what you do now, or did your wife come about from what you do now?
Yeah, great question. In law enforcement, um, I was kind of married to the job, I suppose, right? And my
Yeah.
wife, along the same time in conventional medicine, was kind of married to medicine. Uh, a brief thing about her story in just a moment, but and how we met. But as my later years of law enforcement started to come to an end, I was transferred to the police academy, where I was in charge, among other things, with developing a wellness program for the law enforcement officers. And I found some shocking statistics that told me they didn't live very long. As a matter of fact, 66 or 65 years of old, respectively, was the average age of death for a 20-year retired male police officer. And that really bothered me. And I wanted to find out why. So I did develop a wellness program based upon all the things I could find out. And I started just studying about this. And I realized that trauma and stress and life and connectivity and lack of sleep and all this stuff was not affecting just law enforcement, but it was affecting the world. And I kind of saw that coming. And so I just continued to pursue academia and really understand more that I could put myself in a place. And it wasn't a big change. People think this is different. You're a doctor now, you were a police officer then. No, I'm still protecting and serving. I'm doing the same thing. It's just different. It's probably more
Yeah.
broad, actually. And so in my studying time, just after I had retired from police work, my wife had just started the Functional Medical Institute. And the reason she started the Functional Medical Institute was because mainstream medicine fired her because she was
Mm.
getting too many people too well and she didn't run enough procedures and studies. And that's what she was told. And so, of course, that sent her spiraling into depression, if you will. But she got up one day and started the Functional Medical Institute. And I came into her life probably 3 months after that. And it was just a by chance meeting, love at first sight. And there's a movie out there about it. It's called The Prayer List, as a matter of fact. But we met, and I guess we can say the proverbial phrase, the rest is history at that point.
Yeah, so tell me a bit more about, you said you saw the statistics for law enforcement and their retirement and death ages, and you said you mentioned the words wellness program. So what did that look like? Did you make like a private course for first responders to attend, or what did that kind of look like?
Yeah, I did a lot of different things with that. First of all, it wasn't just about exercise. One of the worst things I found out in dealing with the exercise component for law enforcement is what they were doing was the worst thing they could do. Because if you got a person who's high cortisol driven all the time or high stress all the time, and then you come in and give them what they might want or what they're used to is more high stress, high intensity exercise or CrossFit type movements. That's the worst thing to do because they need to learn how to lower the cortisol. So you can actually utilize basic exercise techniques by conventional weight training and probably some stretching, probably some cardiovascular activity to where you schedule rest periods, to where you don't allow them to start running around and hutting all day. You slow them down a little bit. So that was how we made an adjustment with the exercise. And then we worked on things such as sleep. What kind of things you need to do for sleep? How do you improve sleep sanitation, sleep hygiene, and what supplements might you want to take? Then how do we do nutrition? Because we know that law enforcement eats poorly, and we know that they don't know better. And we know that that's not healthy because it's going to drive hypertension and diabetes, respectively. So we worked on all that. And finally, we worked on the emotional component. how do you deal with the trauma? And the way I look at it was just much like this year, an officer or a military person is, instead of driving down the center of a road, they drive in the ditch because they're on the upper end spectrum of maybe stress all the time. And then at the end of their day, end of their shift, end of their tour, well, that's done. They bounce all the way across the road because they actually have the equal and opposite reaction. And they go in the dumps over here and they're almost comatose for a while until it's time to go back to work. Then they go back across the road again. And so they never spend time living between the lines. So we would factor in times and strategy for them to relax, teach them relaxation techniques like diaphragmatic breathing, to teach them to take a vacation with their wife, not with another cop or not with another military person, to maybe get out alone for a while and just chill out and relax, get away from social media. So we talked about all of those things, and we had a really good, successful program with that for a number of years.
Yeah, I totally hear you on that. And I did want to clarify. So we've mentioned the Functional Medical Institute a bit, and it's in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, is it in person only, or do y'all do telehealth services?
Oh, yeah, we've got people really all over the country. We're licensed in almost every state. Um, and it's been a blessing. I think, as much as COVID was a negative for a lot of different people, turned out to be quite a positive for us because we were able to expand a lot of our services more broadly like that and get multi-state licensure. So now we're able to do telehealth pretty much wherever.
Okay, and I want to get a better understanding of who should go and see you for help.
I would think there's pretty much two demographics that we deal with. One is the Mr. Whiskeys of the world, for example, who just say, you know what? I don't want to get sick. I know I'm not at my best. I want to know how to do this thing where I can live more a preventative life. I know I might need to make some changes, but I want to partner up with someone to teach me how to make those changes, teach me how to do it, and just walk with me through this idea of increasing health span, right? The other demographic is less, but we have some, which is the high level athlete who wants to maximize and optimize performance, perhaps stay on the field longer, stay in the game longer.
Okay, yeah, I think that preventative side is really important.
Yeah.
A lot of people wait until they're sick to see a doctor, so to speak, but there's a lot you can do beforehand. And I want to talk about, I mean, I know on your website you have a lot of different resources, including a couple books. So I'd love to go over those as resources for people who are thinking about, that more preventative side, thinking about
Mm.
nutrition and fitness. Could you talk a little bit about some of the books?
Yeah, we've written several. The first one we wrote was Quest for Wellness, which is basically a handbook for really putting it all together: physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual health, where people can use that book kind of as a tutorial and a guide to find something in there to do in each and all these areas, no matter where you are on your fitness journey. There's a lot of stories in there, there's a lot of motivational techniques in there, a lot of tools in there for them. And then you go to the one, Fork Your Diet, which is really more about lab testing and what you can do to stay well and keep well, what you need to understand and what you need to test if you're not. And in there, interestingly, we talk about a concept called frauds. And we say, don't fall for the frauds because it will take away who you are. And frauds is really an acronym: fear, resentment, anger, unforgiveness, disappointment, and shame. And when we're living in those areas, we're not really living to the fullest of our capacity and really in who we are. And then from there, we talk about surviving the Garden of Eden. Nice title, but that was one that we really wanted to understand from a biblical, spiritual point of view, where it all went wrong. Why do so many people struggle with nutrition so bad? And it all started in the Garden of Eden. We know the first temptation was with food. So we kind of break that all down for people to kind of get. And then from there, we did a devotional book, which was called The Narrow Road, which is just my wife and I sharing our hearts about, various things, little one page devotionals or 1.5 page devotionals for people to read. And then from there, we wrote two more that just came out this year. If they're not on there yet, they will be. One is called Peptides Unlocked. The second one is called Hormones Unlocked. So we'll be doing an unlocked type of series. The next one on there sometime, probably next year, will be Fat Loss Unlocked. So we'll keep that unlocked series going. And then we're just finishing up one now called Authentic Longevity, which should be out very, very soon. So those are some of the resources we have. And there's a bunch of blogs and videos on there as well.
So I want to address as far as the dietary one specifically, do you believe, because I've studied, food throughout the Bible as well, and I'm curious to what you and your wife came to the conclusion of. Do you believe that people should be vegan or vegetarian, or do you believe in omnivorous diet? Like, what kind of was the conclusion that you came to?
Well, I looked at all of it. I really did. And I get it. People have their preferences. I get it. They have their concepts and ideas, and they have the reasons. But here's the deal. Prior to the fall of man, it was clear that vegetarianism was the concept. After the fall of man and after Noah landed his boat, it was clear we began to eat a meat. We became carnivores as well. And so I haven't seen that change. We should be eating some meats, animal products, and we should be eating plants. It's both. Now, I get it. There are a lot of people out there today that really talk about one or the other. But
Yeah.
I go further in the Bible and I think, okay, who is the example we should be looking at? And that would be the life of Jesus.
Mhm.
And the first meal he had post resurrections was fish. So, when I look at that, there's no way that we can say that it is vegetarianism. And there's no way that we can say that it's only prescribed to be the carnivore diet. It's somewhere in between. And then finally, I'll conclude my answer with this. For those hardcore carnivore enthusiasts, and by the way, the majority of them are basing that on evolution as opposed to creation. So that's clearly a different
Yeah.
thing. And a lot of people don't know that because these people sometimes will claim they're Christians or claim they're people that follow God's principles, but they don't. It's just not there. But there is a tree of life in Eden, and that same tree of life is mentioned in Revelation in the new heaven. So apparently it's both right now, and apparently, post resurrection, I suppose it's going to be primarily plants again if we eat.
Yeah, and for the carnivorous enthusiasts, if you look at Daniel, what did he eat, right? He ate only the vegetables and he
That's right.
outperformed all of, the king's fattened meats and all that. So, and most of the kings in the, Old Testament were eating Wagyu, the equivalent of Wagyu steak. You look at
Oh
King
yeah,
Solomon, just for him and his palace, they had 10 fattened oxes and 10 pasture oxes a day and 100 sheep, which is insane. I mean,
yeah.
I thought it was insane, and I thought about how many animals must be killed and eaten today, and I said, I guess it seems less. But again, that was just for one palace, not for a whole country. But I think it's
Yeah.
interesting, even if you say, okay, I don't believe in God, I believe in evolution. So why did I evolve to have teeth that can, or specifically for plant matter, like because I feel like if I was a carnivore, all my teeth should be sharp then, right? I mean, I'm no scientist, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah, what they do with that one is they kind of twist things a little bit. They say, well, okay, like a baboon or a gorilla. They have teeth too, but they have a longer GI tract. The longer GI tract allows for the plants to be broken down properly. And so these plants that have a hard time being broken down are meant to be eaten by them because of the longer GI tract, the longer transit time. And humans have evolved, they'll say that word, they've evolved to have shorter GI tracts. And the reason that this is some of their rationale. The reason we started eating plants is because the amount of meat products began to go down. And so they had to do what they do to bring in some plants to help themselves survive. And they just haven't learned any better, And now, but I do think some benefits exist from that. And the benefits don't come from that. They come from what you're not doing, which is inclusive of the a standard American Western diet. So that's the truth. And by the way, I have had people do hardcore carnivore, much like some of the kings of old, and I have watched their labs go to horrible places.
Yeah.
I've seen it, and most people don't believe it. But when you're biased, I try not to be biased. I try to work really hard not to be implicitly biased. But when you're biased, you tend to only look for evidence supporting your claim.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that can get in there to anybody's life, including mine, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's one of the logical fallacies or something like that is what they call it. And all I know from what I've studied is those bathroom trips are brutal when you're a carnivore only. That's all I'll
Yeah.
say on that. And again, we don't have any organs that produce cellulase in abundance to help
Mm-mm.
digest cellulose, which for those who don't know, chain like it kind of like if you think of how you can rip a piece of paper, but if you try to just pull a piece of paper, you know, hence corn and other stuff that we just don't digest, which I'm sure
Right.
everyone's had their fair share of witnessing that event, so to
Oh
speak.
yeah.
So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you mentioned kind of the standard American diet. I know a lot of people talk about there are, the Mediterranean diet, there's the European diet, there's Asian diet, there's we've got a lot of research in fasting, keto diets and all and intermittent fasting. A lot of dip everywhere you go, someone's telling you eat differently. So
Mm.
what have you found in all of your research? You talked about kind of a balanced diet just shortly ago. What have you found is best, or what do you kind of so to speak, prescribe to everyone?
30,000 foot view is eating natural foods in their natural packaging, the way they're naturally made, and so that's a 30,000 foot view. But I do genetics on almost every person. There is some genetic tendencies to based upon, perhaps where you came from geographically, the heritage, if you will, or the ancestry, if you will. There's some little, shifts, I suppose. Some people can tolerate dairy a little bit better than others. Some people can't at all, and some of that is genetic. And then some people tend to prefer more of the, um, I will say, moderate carbohydrate diet if they have like an Asian descent, whereas compared to the European descent, maybe more of the Mediterranean paleo style. So there's a little subtle differences. With that said, my wife and I, neither of us will prescribe, or do we prefer to even use the word diet? Because the word diet tends to indicate what you're not supposed to do, and you get to
Yeah.
focus on the things you're not supposed to do. And I realize, looking at the Bible and my studies on that, and based upon the previous question, what did Satan do to Adam and Eve? He got them focusing away from abundance and upon deprivation. So to
Mm.
me, that's why diets don't work. It's the wrong focus. So we give people, generally speaking, a list of what we consider anti-inflammatory foods, which are in their natural packaging and natural sourcing as well. And we say to them, have as much as you want. If you're hungry, eat. If you're not, don't. And to do that, we're teaching them not only the principle of abundance, but we're also teaching them that they don't have to eat X number of times per day at X number of meals, because that doesn't fit our heritage either, because from a genetic standpoint, we still are hunter-gatherers by DNA.
Yeah, so it's like eat when you can and whatnot, like
That's
set
right.
times and schedule. And I will say, we all know that one friend who is not so good at digesting dairy, but eats
Mhm.
all the ice cream and milk anyway, and then it's never a good time. So we
No.
all we all know that one friend. But yeah, so I think you've also got some courses on your website. I know you mentioned. Well, Backstep, actually, I did want to ask you just for people who aren't as, medically knowledged about some of this stuff. You mentioned the word peptides. You've got a whole
Hmm.
book coming out about
Yeah.
that. But just for people who are curious, they heard the word and they don't know what it means. What could you talk about that and why it's important for our health?
Well, peptides are naturally occurring substances in the body. So it's not something that I made up, or not something that some pharmacist made up somewhere. They are chains of amino acids strung or stuck together in lengths of 50 amino acids or less. That would be a peptide. So when you bond two or three together up to 50, that's considered a peptide. And when you Go above 50 and under 100, that's considered a polypeptide, and above 100 is considered a protein. See, work it backwards. A protein is made up of amino acids. So you could also say a protein is made up of peptides. So it depends on how you look at it. So they're natural substances made of amino acids, and we now have the ability to mimic those things that we're producing in the human body in a lab, in a natural setting, a natural format with natural products, and we're able to bring those things back in under the idea that we produce less efficient peptide production as we age. Peptides can initiate repair, regeneration of tissues, joints. They can help lower fat tissue, grow muscle, help with your brain, renew your immune system, upregulate your mitochondria. So there's a lot of things they can do if you just use them. And they're out there right now. They're becoming more and more popular.
Yeah, I've come across it in some interesting longevity research and cell
Mhm.
repair, which you did mention a book coming out about longevity, and I would say, what is one thing everyone could just start doing today to live a little bit longer?
Yeah, I think it's this. It's not focusing on death. It may sound a little bit kind of simplistic, but it's really not. Focus on life. And what that means is every encounter you have, you want to put everything you got into it so that you can leave it better than you found it.
Mm,
Um, Love somebody else, show them love, care about other people, take care of yourself, so that you can care for other people. And those are simple principles, but it does matter. And I tell people move every day, sit less, move more. Sitting is the new smoking. People kind of get that. I tell them to make sure you prioritize sleep because that's the only time you really can rest and repair and regenerate, rebuild. And I tell them to manage that stress. Get away from it all. Get away from social media. Relax. Go on a vacation. Go on a date night with your wife. I mean, I do that every week, and make no bones about it. I don't care who calls me. I'm busy, and so it's all about really looking at life differently and looking at it with this idea of the blessing it is, because you're only getting 1,440 minutes a day. That's all you get, or that's what you get. It depends on how you look at it. And so I look at it as that's what I get. And I want to manage it right. There's no refunds of time spent. You can't go spend your time and go, man, I blew that one. I'm going to take it back to Walmart for a refund. It's not going to happen. So ultimately, those are some principles that I know will help people have a better and increased health span.
yeah, and for out of those 1,444 minutes, glad y'all are spending them right here learning how to improve your health because that's a good way to do it. I think
Mhm.
you mentioned something important, which is actual rest. And I think so many
Yeah.
people substitute sleep with TV time or video game time or social media time. And there's a difference, like, as you mentioned already, when your brain's not that your brain shuts all the way off when you're sleeping, but when your body actually goes into a different state compared to, your social media time, which
Yeah.
based on all the episodes I've had on my show, social media time is honestly just damaging,
Yeah.
more than it is good. But yeah, and then I mentioned earlier we were going to get into your courses. You have a couple of different courses on the website. Could you kind of just talk about those and just a brief overview and what they kind of pertain of and who should do them?
Well, I mean, we got the goal reset plan, which is just a no-brainer. I mean, people want to know where to start. They want to start with where do I start with nutrition? I've been off course. I don't know what to do. What do I do? Where do I start? And you start right there at that little 30-day plan. And it's real basic. We're giving you a detox that you're going to do for a couple of weeks. We tell you what to do. There's no restrictions of calories. We give you all the nutrients you need to take care of you, both to support the detox pathways and then also to support just regular pathways as the regular basic nutrients you might need. And then we progress from there into a plan that might last for 4 months. In that case, we do our big labs, we do our genetics on you, and we can actually analyze both of those things and work with you in that 4 month process to not only do the basics, but create a transformative plan for the person that will benefit them for the rest of their days.
Mm, yeah. And then I know we mentioned earlier on kind of the two demographics of people who see the preventative and then the restorative, so to speak. What kind of people should go to you with what kind of health issues? Do you cover kind of like everything, or do you have more specialized care units that people should focus on? Or is it like, hey, I'm not feeling well, Dr. Mark Sherwood, you got me.
It would be pretty much everything because we realize that everything can create anything and
Yeah.
anything can cause everything. And so they're all connected. So, I should say this preventive. Let me just kind of, that's the mindset part of this, right? Within that mindset, you might be in a place in time where you just don't feel well for various reasons. But because you have the mindset of prevention, you're the right person. But within the idea of where you are right now, you don't feel well. We're all going to find out why you feel that way and fix it so that we can transfer that not feeling well into a positive preventive mindset. So it's really wherever you are, I think it really boils down to the idea of making your decision that you want to get better.
Right. And we're gonna have your website in the description below for people to check out everything, supplements, food and
Mm.
nutrition, personal care, equipment, books, courses, bundles, and of course, anything else they need. And then I want to leave with this question. I feel like we've kind of addressed, I think it's a question that, you could give 100 answers to, and we've given some answers to them, but if you had to just pick one to say, what is the number one thing that people get wrong about health, or the biggest misconception there is right now about health, what would that be, and what would you encourage people to reflect on when they find out that answer from you?
You know, well done on that one. I like that one a lot. But I would have to say it's the belief system that they don't have to be sick.
Mm,
Because ultimately, like, what is health? It's more than just the absence of sickness. It's the ability to do what you want, when you want, how you want, and not hurt. The ability to live your life without the distraction of being sick or being ill. And so a lot of people don't believe that. They've been conditioned so many times that they are as they are because of ABC diagnosis. And that simply does not have to be. And it's frankly it's heartbreaking for us because we've seen people get better. We've seen people improve. We've seen people with autoimmune conditions get it reversed and live a great, full, amazing life. We've seen people with osteoarthritis get corrected, osteoporosis get corrected, and type 2 diabetes get reversed. We've seen people with brain, chemistry disorders get better. I think it's a belief system,
mm,
and we may be crazy a little bit, but one thing I know, well, actually, two things I know. I don't have it all figured out. And I believe one person does. And I believe the second thing that our bodies are capable, able, and made to bring healing into that body. So they're able to heal them, restore themselves if we give it the right information.
yeah, not to sound cliche, but the not just surviving, but thriving, having
That's
an
right.
abundance of health. I agree. And I think, yeah, so many people let their ailment, whatever it is, become their identity. And
Mm.
I even did a whole episode on social media creating ailments as trendy, or the popularity and attention around certain ailments online. And I won't open up that can of worms right here because that is a messy discussion. And
It
it's,
is.
if you haven't looked into that, it's a very shocking thing, at least at least to me, and I think a lot of the older generations. It's kind of strange to see the idea of, I want to have depression, or I want to have anxiety, or I want to
Oh,
have Down syndrome. And some of the stuff I've seen online, it's very interesting. When people say we're in a mental health crisis, and there's so many different ones happening at the same time. So I think it's important. But on the flip side, on the positive side of social media, of shows like this, and of what you're doing with guesting and writing, there are a lot of resources being passed around.
yeah.
There's a lot of conscious health choices being made more and more every day, and a lot of education. What I say with that is, there's a lot of misinformation, misleading information, and a lot of frauds. Not the frauds that you mentioned, but actual frauds who
Yeah,
promote health and they're on steroids or other
yeah,
medications. So be careful who you choose and who you listen to. But listen to Dr. Mark Sherwood. He was here, and if you want to listen to more of him,
yeah.
there's movies, there's books, there's other podcasts. But I want to thank you for your time today. And again, if people want to connect with you further and check out your information, it's going to be in the description below. And I appreciate everything you said, and I hope that, everyone today, whether you have an ailment or not, and especially if you don't have an ailment, just take a step back to reflect on your health. Are you where you want to be? Or are you just satisfied? And if you're just satisfied, can you be healthier? Can you be living more abundantly?
Great question. Great way to think about it, and I think the answer is yes. And I guess from me, just parting remarks, I think I would want people to be encouraged. If this is giving them a little bit of belief system to fire that concept of hope, that is a win. And I kind of wear these little bracelets that I give away, says hope dealer on it, right? And give those things away because I want people to have it and I want people to get it. And when they have hope and they get hope, they're going to go give hope. So I appreciate your kind words about us. It means a lot. And we're going to keep doing our best. And I really appreciate you having me today.
Sailing through the ocean blue, nuclear reactors my crew, guiding the ship, the stars as our guide, through the waves we ride, jokes and laughter fill the air. On this voyage we have to share, working together, side by side, as one family we will abide. In the heart of the ship we reside, nuclear operators with pride, powering the vessel with every stride. Our mission, a source of great pride.